Hi, everyone. Scott and Matty here,
Hi.
and welcome to Queer as Pop, the podcast where we discuss all things queer and how they intersect with pop culture, politics, and the top headlines. Matty, how are you doing on this very fine day?
I'm doing great. Besides the somewhat crappy weather, I'm actually super excited because today is going to be our very first Halloween episode.
Ooh, I know. It's so exciting.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to our guest that's going to come by a bit later, and we have some exciting questions that's going to come up as well. So I hope everyone will stick around for that.
Yeah, it should be a ton of fun. But so what kind of crappy weather do you got going on right now?
It's just rain. This is the general October season in Gothenburg in Sweden. It's just rain every day, every fucking day.
It sounds so delightfully dreary.
Yeah, I kind of hate it, but it fits the mood with Halloween and everything. So,
Speaking of Halloween, have you indulged in any fun Halloween movies yet or anything spooky?
not really. I mean, we don't really celebrate Halloween in the same way that you do in the States. I
This is
mean,
blasphemy. Tell me more.
kids do trick or treat, but we don't really decorate our houses or make like a really huge deal about it. There's actually here in Gothenburg we have an amusement park that has some really fun events that I usually go with my friends, but that's been locked down because of COVID, so that's not going to happen this year.
So then growing up, did you like dress up at all or like what was your sort of little contribution to Halloween when you were still maybe celebrating it a bit more?
I used to dress up as a witch when I was a kid, but I understand that in the US it's a really, really big deal for you guys.
Heck yeah. I mean, it's an excuse to, as a child, wear something really cutesy and fun and get boatloads of candy, which, as a kid, like, how could you not be excited by that? And then as you transition to an adult, it gives you the experience of wearing something insanely slutty that you can get away with basically only that day of the year because you're like, what? It's my Halloween costume. This one piece that I'm wearing, I swear this is meant to be just barely covering anything at all, leaving nothing to the imagination, but it's my Halloween costume, so it's fine.
Oh, really? Do you have pictures?
There might be, but you're gonna have to earn them for me to be sending them your way.
Oh, really? Do you have any, like, is there any particular movie that you've been watching, like, as a tradition every year during Halloween?
There's okay, so there's I always approach like Halloween movies in two different ways. Like I have the one that scarred me from a very young age, and then I have the one that like I'll probably always watch just because it's so freaking good. So the one I watch to this day because it's just so freaking good is Scream. I mean, just a classic, really fun horror movie that is just it's over the top, it's ridiculous. The actors and actresses in it are fantastic. So yeah, like I'll definitely watch Scream pretty much every year.
For me, it's usually Corpse Bride. That's usually the movie that I go back to. I know Nightmare Before Christmas is a huge deal for a lot of people, but Corpse Bride has just been a movie that I've fallen in love with, and I still love it to this day. And I don't know if you can call Aliens a horror movie per se, but it's actually one of my favorite movies of all time. So that's something that I usually watch during this time as well.
I think Aliens is 100% a horror movie. Anyone that tries to say otherwise, I would give them a raised eyebrow and shake my head because it's so much horror. It's
Yeah.
it's sci-fi horror, but it is absolutely horror.
Yeah, I don't know why I put that movie under the term of being a thriller, but it was scary as shit when you were a kid. When you watched it for the first time, it traumatized me.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. So for me, the movie that traumatized me as a kid though was Chucky. I was convinced that Chucky lived in the basement of our house when I was growing up, and my mother would always make me take all of the frozen goods that she purchased from the grocery store down to the freezer, down in the basement. And I hated going down there because I was just convinced that Chucky was waiting for me. So I would always like just sprint down there and just throw everything in the freezer without even worrying about where it went in the freezer and just raced back upstairs like with my heart absolutely pounding because I just could not get out of there faster. It was always just a terrifying experience.
Oh my god! Can I ask you what your biggest fear is?
Ooh, my biggest fear? Oh man. What my biggest fear? Probably like, I tend to have a somewhat irrational fear of like heights,
Yeah,
where like if I am like looking over something where I have no like protective harness to like hold me in place, like I would be like a little I on the inside I'd be like, "Ooh, ooh, ooh, get me away from here," but I may outwardly not show any visible signs, but like on the inside I'm just like quaking a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah.
What about you?
I want to say mannequins.
Mannequins.
There's something creepy about mannequins, and I remember when I was younger playing Silent Hill 3, and there was a room full of mannequins in that game. There was a scene where they were interacting with each other, and it's just so freaky to me. So I don't really like mannequins. Anything that is trying to resemble a human freaks me out.
Okay. So like something that gets close to a human shape but not really human is where you get a little nervous.
Yeah, these like new advanced AI robots that look like beautiful, gorgeous women, but once they turn around, you see this stale, creepy face. I just can't handle it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I can appreciate that. That would be a little creepy, especially if it's like dimly lit and like you're sort of all alone and all of a sudden you like see these like mannequins outlines just like over in the distance. Like, yeah, that'd be a little creepy.
Yeah. So, if we haven't mentioned it for you guys listening yet, but our guest today is actually Peaches Christ, and we're gonna head over to her right now, so stick around.
Welcome back, everyone. Now, I'm really excited to introduce to you our very special guest today. Peaches Christ is a filmmaker, an underground drag, and cult leader living in San Francisco. Her infamous cult movie events are self-produced at the Castro Theater and regularly draw over 1,000 attendees to each production. Peaches has also toured these cult movie events throughout the US to locations like Seattle, Los Angeles, New York, and Provincetown. But also, her love of Halloween and creative genius has also created a truly terrifying experience called the Terror Vault, an immersive event that mixes elements of a haunted house with escape rooms and theater to frighten anyone who dares to enter. Peaches, happy Halloween, and how are you today?
I'm doing great. Happy Halloween, everybody. It's really good to hear from you.
Absolutely. I'm just so excited that you're able to join us.
It's my pleasure.
So, we before we really get into the meat of our interview, we always like to start off with a nice little icebreaker. So, with that
Mhm.
in mind, I have a really good one again that's kind of themed a little more Halloween-esque. The zombie apocalypse is coming. Who are three people you would want on your team to survive?
Wow. Okay. Well, can I ask a few questions of you?
Absolutely, ask away.
Are there rules? These be fictional people? Do they have to be alive? Could they be dead? What are the parameters?
In my opinion, anyone that you want from any time period, alive, dead, made up, it is you to decide.
Okay, then I'm gonna pick fictional characters. I think what would be fun, and I'm actually, picturing this as a movie, of course.
Of course.
I would want it to be myself, Elvira, Divine, and
Okay.
Frankenfurter.
Oh my gosh. I
No,
love that. I love that.
I think we'd survive.
So, like, I mean, in your mind, have you ever just like planned out sort of what you would do if all of a sudden zombies started taking over? Because I mean, with things like The Walking Dead, I mean, it's like it goes through my mind too. I'm like, okay, what would I do?
I guess a little bit, but nothing as serious as starting to think about. You, I guess this is the closest I've ever felt to a zombie apocalypse. Is the state that we're currently sadly surviving in the United States, because I really believe it's going to get scarier before it gets better. I do think there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm an optimist, but these days are dark, and I think they're going to get darker. So, I've never considered something like getting a gun or, anything like that until this year, So
Interesting.
now I'm not going to buy a gun, but it's conversations, my friends and I have had, like, well, what's going to happen, when the president of the United States, is instructing, white supremacists to stand by for his inevitable loss,
Oh my gosh. That line that he had during that taped debate between him and Joe Biden was I could not believe it when I was witnessing it. It blew me away that he was willing to admit that.
Yeah, and that's the thing about so the reason, I guess, not to be so serious regarding such a fun question, but there is part of me that's like, God, I would never have thought. I feel like we're living in a movie right now. I guess that's my point. Between the global pandemic and the election and the fires, if you're in California, the fires up and down the coast, and just whatever else. It's like, what the fuck? Like, we're living in a movie all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, watching it from an outsider's perspective, it's kind of insane, like, what's going on in States. I feel like maybe we need to, like, flip the question almost and ask you, who are the 3 people you'd want to be dead in a zombie apocalypse?
Well, I mean, I guess more than dead, I would love to see Trump and his family go to prison. I would love to see, I think that would be just very satisfying.
If I dared to dream, that would be something I would agree with right there.
Yeah. So, I mean, we know they've broken laws. We know they deserve to be in prison. We know, that they're above the law in many ways. So that would feel like justice.
Yeah, I totally agree.
As far as dead, yeah, I guess I would. There's no, it's like, someone said, oh, it's so awful to wish the president would die, when he had COVID, and people were like, oh, well. But the reality of it is, it's like, we as a country rooted for the capture and death of Osama bin Laden. And, that was for the, terrorist attacks, which were, definitely an attack on this country, and, awful. And, but I have to say, I mean, this is going to sound awful and maybe even be controversial. Like, Osama bin Laden, at least in some ways, believed in something. And if you look at what we did to the Middle East versus the way Trump is running the country and being so cavalier about the pandemic and the deaths of people and putting babies in cages and, on and on and on, it's like, well, why shouldn't we root for the death of this person? I mean, the amount of awful suffering. I apologize.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Your listeners are probably like, what the fuck is wrong with her?
No, they're probably nodding their heads and say, like, yup. Because, I mean, okay, like, to me, I understand the sentiment, because we really are talking about, for a lot of people, fundamental rights that may be threatened because of his level of leadership and the style of leadership, and really who he's letting, even as evidence, into the Supreme Court that gets to decide a lot of our livelihoods and ability just to be who we are without persecution or discrimination. Mm-hmm. And so, I absolutely understand where you're coming from. This does mean whether you can live the type of life you would want to live in our country if this person continues to be a leader here.
Yeah.
And sadly, it means some people have already lost their lives. I mean, the amount of people that have died in this country due to poor leadership and just lying with the pandemic alone is already, there's already enough suffering and death because of that. And then when you look at what's going on with the Supreme Court and the fact that, we may live in a country where not only, do gays and lesbians lose the right to marry, but women might lose the right to choice. Like, yeah. What? And that we know leads to death. That leads to death. We know that. We've experienced it, So it's like women, and I mean, just anyone that's not a billionaire is basically fucked, if we continue down this road.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And that's the unfortunate part. Yeah. Thank you for that though. I really appreciate it.
So maybe we all move to Sweden.
You guys are so welcome here.
But
Get
are
hang
we?
some- well,
Are we really?
as long as you're okay with our socialist ways and the fermented herring,
Yes.
you are
Yes,
very
I'm
welcome
very
to
okay.
come here.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah. Then I mean, I'm definitely a fighter. I think I think especially when they start messing with the queers, you're going to see more and more mobilization. But at some point you go, it might just be easier. I mean, to go somewhere else,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tempting, right?
It really is. Well, again, I know that your questions were meant to be more fun, so I hate everyone's.
No.
People
Hey,
are
these
people
are
are looking at your. You might even have some listeners who said, "Ugh, I can't watch the news. I can't look at the fucking internet anymore." It's just also,
Yeah.
oh, Peaches Christ is on this podcast. She sounds fun, and then they tune in and want to slit their wrists.
All right. Well, with that, let's shift it back. Let's realign our energies. I have a really interesting question that I think that a lot of people would like to know about. I would certainly love to know more. How did Peaches Christ come to be, and what were some of your comedic and drag inspirations while you were growing up?
Well, I mean, so your first question actually about the zombie apocalypse is a great segue because I grew up a kid in Maryland who really felt like the black sheep of the world because I went to Catholic school and grew up in Annapolis, Maryland, which is very conservative and very preppy, and it's where the Naval Academy is. And I went to Catholic school, and I was the kid who I was like the Addams Family kid, just always into anything horror or dark from the time my parents could remember. So I was always a weirdo, and I was unapologetically flamboyant and a sissy and into theater and movies. And, so in a way, I mean, Peaches is the culmination of, everything I've always been, but wasn't allowed to be. So, growing up, it felt very suffocating being in that environment. Like there was nobody else who was really like me. And, of course, I couldn't be openly queer as a kid. And, being Catholic, there's all sorts of issues. So, all those things, you take them and put them in a blender and you kind of get Peaches Christ, later in life. And my inspirations were people like Elvira. And my first introduction to drag was through the movie Hairspray, because they were making it when I was in junior high. And the idea that someone was making a movie in Baltimore, in neighborhoods where my aunt lived and my grandparents lived, was surreal because Hollywood felt like a million miles away. Then to go, to discover that the mother in this movie was actually a man. I didn't even know the word drag queen, but I was just completely bowled over by Divine, and the fact that they were in Maryland and up the street from where I was growing up was, it was like a watershed moment. And then shortly after that, I discovered the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So my whole drag introduction was fused with cult movies. And then, of course, I created this character myself that celebrates cult movies and is in many ways an inspiration from those sorts of early experiences.
I love hearing about all of these awesome influences you have in terms of also what it means for a lot of your theatrical productions that you've created. So with like that massive catalog of all of these different shows that you've created for yourself that you've shared with so many wonderful people, what are some of the productions that you've felt really proud of, and whatever some of the inspirations you tend to pull from in particular with these productions?
Well, I guess, I mean, it's sort of, I get asked this from time to time, and I ask myself the same question. So I never really get upset at people for asking, but it is a little bit like Sophie's Choice because, you create something, and especially because I've created so many over the years, because I've been doing this a long time, I'm attached to different shows for different reasons. And, it's really, really hard to pick a favorite. But I can say that there are certain ones that sort of stand out. One of those would be Return to Grey Gardens, which I created for myself and Jinx Monsoon. I guess the reason is because I loved the movie Grey Gardens so much and had worshipped it for years, but I was really reluctant to show it or to do a parody of it because I was so worried that people might get the wrong impression and think that, because my shows are camp and they're over the top and outrageous, I didn't want to create a show that was making fun of the Beals. I actually think Little Edie is an eccentric hero to me and so many people. But there are people, I think, that watch that film and don't get it. They watch it like they're watching an episode of Hoarders or something. And it's sort of this, judgmental kind of view. So I wanted to create a show where there was a sort of a sentimentality to it that wasn't just comedy. And luckily, I'd known Jinx and then watched her nail her Little Edie impersonation on Snatch Game when she was on Drag Race. And so when I created that show, and actually, if you've seen the show, or even if you haven't, there's like a sort of a sentimentality to it, especially at the end. And there's a lot of, actual comedy, of course, but also, real sort of drama. So I'm really proud of that show because it was me stepping outside of my comfort zone, for sure. And then, there's other shows where I'm really proud of them because, just the spectacle or sort of the cleverness of the ideas of how to, create, for example, doing Beetlejuice, which is, my attempt to do a theatrical version of Beetlejuice on a budget, I like those shows a lot too, just because we had to be so clever with, stretching every dollar.
Yeah, I can only imagine when you have a set budget in mind how challenging a lot of that can be in terms of just thinking about how do you make this as immersive and entertaining and instructive and informative and relevant as possible with like the dollars you just literally have only to spend.
Right. I mean, we're not Broadway. And so we have a very limited budget. And in fact, I think it's why people like my shows so much is because, the big joke about Peaches Christ Productions, which Coco Peru loved to make when we did The Witches of East Bay, was, this is what this looks like in a Peaches Christ production. So you'll basically just have to forgive it and come on this sort of imaginative fantasy journey with us. Coco kept saying, she kept adding the words "in a Peaches Christ production" at the end of different lines, which the audience loved. But there is this sort of, especially in San Francisco, and now in a lot of the other cities where I go regularly, because just like the movies, which are cult, my shows have become, in a sense, cult in certain places. So, San Francisco or Seattle or Portland, Los Angeles, London, New York, those cities really now know what going to a Peaches Christ show is all about, which is that the fourth wall will be broken. The actors will acknowledge that they can see you. That things will go wrong for sure. That things that, that never is it intentional. If you come to a Peaches Christ show, if you come to the same show multiple times, you'll always get a different show because something new will go wrong. Because unlike a real stage show, we rehearse these things for 3 days and then we put them on stage at the Castro, for 1,400 people. So in many ways, a lot of them are just total disasters. And that's, that's what people love. They love watching, actually seeing these queens have to like think on their feet and improv and deal with the problems that are thrown our way.
I've been fortunate to be able to go to a number of your productions, and I can absolutely understand and say as a bystander or just an audience member, it is It is something special to almost watch the fourth wall be broken and those blips in the production to happen, because it feels way more intimate then, because you get to see everyone in that very human moment of stepping out of character just a tad to make that little joke or have that little bit of a laugh. It really is, to I think what you're saying, really just a special moment for the audience to be a part of that sort of, ongoing improvement process.
Right. Yeah. So there's that side to the question as well, where I have some of my favorite experiences on stage aren't necessarily my favorite shows, but more just really memorable things that happened, that we had to kind of overcome. But yeah, I think in a way, someone once said, actually, it's funny that we keep bringing up, or I keep bringing up Coco, because Coco is actually very much the opposite of me. I tend to work with big crews. I love a giant collaboration. I actually like, writing for other people and playing a secondary part. Coco does these fantastic, brilliant one-woman shows that are these, original monologues with music, but everything is so perfectly rehearsed. Like when Coco hits the road, when she does a show, it is totally dialed in. And I know this because, I've been fortunate enough to be part of her process while she creates a show. And, her neurotic obsession is what makes her so brilliant. Whereas I'm like more like, oh my God, okay, everybody, let's put on a show. What do you mean we don't have the money to have someone fly? Fuck it, we'll figure it out. It's just a much more of an Ed Wood kind of fly by the seat of my pants mentality. And so what I love about working with Coco, especially, is her doing my shows is like watching an exercise in anxiety. It's just it's like you're wondering when the nervous breakdown's gonna hit, but she keeps coming back for more, so I guess she's a glutton for punishment.
I love it. I love it so much.
I'm sure she is. But if we look at, now we've been talking about Coco, but if we look at the evolution of drag over the years, and Coco is definitely one of these drag queens that have ascended through history, basically. How do you feel about the recent mainstream explosion of drag, and how does it compare to the scene back when you started out?
Well, I mean, again, another favorite Coco memory or story was when she and we were invited to the first. We've attended many of them, but we were specifically invited to appear at and be featured in the first RuPaul's Drag Con, which, if you don't know, is a giant convention in Los Angeles featuring drag queens. And that first year, especially, they really didn't want it to be RuPaul's Drag Race, Drag Con. They wanted it to be a drag convention, where myself and Coco Peru and Lady Bunny, and they really featured us. And so Coco and I showed up, and I remember walking in and she and I looking at each other and actually having a conversation like, did you ever think you would see the day? Like, it was so far removed from our realm of possibilities that we never even knew to look forward to something like that, because drag, when we started doing it, was so niche and so transgressive, and even amongst the gay community was not popular. We like, it's one thing to be popular in the mainstream, but I'm telling you, it wasn't even popular amongst gays or queer people. I'll separate the two. Actually, it was popular with queer people. It wasn't popular with gay people. Like, if it's that thing where, like, in the mid 90s, there were, and there still is that way. Like, there are gay people and there are queer people, and queer people tend to have, I think, a more radical sense of self-expression and outness, and a better sense of politics and activism, and aren't really interested in being heteronormative, and so those folks loved drag, and especially in the mid 90s, at the height of grunge, and horror was still considered niche, and punk rock, drag was really kind of wild and experimental and outrageous. And the drag that was traditional still existed, and we loved it. Female illusion, queens doing Liza Minnelli and stuff. But in the 90s, there was this sort of rise in New York and San Francisco, especially, and LA, of sort of a punk rock drag scene, whether it was through Tranny Shack in San Francisco or Squeeze Box in New York or Club Makeup or Drag Strip in Los Angeles. And this was in London as well, with, the alternative Miss World pageant and everything. And so now that drag is kind of the pumpkin latte of gay culture.
I love that. I love that.
It's become so basic and so I would be lying if I didn't, if I, wasn't, if I sit here and try to pretend I'm not the bitter old queen that I am, I'll be a liar. No, I won't say that I'm a bitter old queen, but I will say that I'm glad and grateful for the fact that I got to be part of my young drag years were part of being radical and offending people and, not being accepted. And that worked for me. And I appreciate the popularity, certainly financially. And as a business person, I've benefited from the success and popularity of Drag Race or Dragula as well, which, I've been a judge on all 3 seasons. So I'm not going to sit here and kind of pretend that I haven't benefited from it. I have. I honestly do believe, though, that I had a richer experience than a lot of the girls coming up now will have. And that's not me being shady as much as me being disappointed, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So to elaborate on that, would you say that drag today is more one-dimensional in a way that lacks the characteristics of the past in many regards to style and aesthetics and things like that?
I think that, it's what I see happening is this overwhelming popularity of this one TV show has kind of dictated to an entire generation of aspiring drag performers what drag is, what drag looks like, what drag should be, through a series of challenges and games and things. And so I guess I don't fault RuPaul's Drag Race for being successful at all. I mean, it's a great TV show. It's wildly entertaining. Yeah. What I think is a bummer is that it has less than even the drag queens, because I think drag queens are still quite brilliant, and I think that, like, you watch queens on the TV show, they come off of it, they're talented and amazing. I think I'm more disappointed in what it's done to drag fan culture. That's where I'm really I'm not turned off by the drag queens. Honestly, I'm still inspired by the drag performers and, and really look forward to seeing what they're bringing. And especially on a show like Dragula, where, it's just wild what these queens are coming up with. But it's the culture of fandom through the popularity of these shows that I think has become so mean-spirited and just basic and tired and know-it-all and jerky. And I think that's where I'm turned off more than anything.
I mean, there's definitely a very toxic part of the community and the fan base that you can easily observe if you go to any of these drag queens' Twitter feed. It's like an open book.
It's mean.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And luckily in some ways I think I remember at one point, Bob, and Jinx. Bob, the drag queen, and Jinx Monsoon are my drag daughters, so I'm lucky that I have two very fabulous Drag Race winners that I can claim as, my children. But there was a time when, Bob, and still to this day is like, I really think you should have gone on Drag Race. I really think you should have done it. I would have loved to have seen Peaches on Drag Race. And I would be stupid to say that I hadn't, considered it or that it wasn't something of interest to me. But there's this other side to it where it's like, I really like, in a way, still being weird or niche. and not being,
Yeah.
I wish I had their bank accounts, they definitely, not all of them. I mean, that's the other thing. A lot of queens now have this misconception that in order to be successful, you have to get on RuPaul's Drag Race. Well, the reality of it is you can be successful and not get on RuPaul's Drag Race. That's for sure. And also, just because you get on RuPaul's Drag Race doesn't mean you're going to be successful. Out of 150 queens that have been on that show, there's only a handful of them that make those giant salaries every year. So it's this other thing about turning drag into a business that just wasn't. That's not the way that like the legends, as they like to call us, which is just a nice way of saying the old queens. The way that the us legends did it was to pursue it as an art form and a passion and a hobby, because the idea of making a lot of money doing this wasn't really in our sight. It wasn't something we thought was possible. So, the fact that some of us have gone on to be able to build careers out of it, all of us did not set out to do that. I really don't. I don't think you would talk, if you talk to me or Varla Jean Merman or Heclina or Jackie Beat or any of the older queens that have been working a long, long time, most of us had other jobs, for a long time.
Other side gigs to kind of prop yourself up while you were pursuing your passion, which was your performances in drag.
Yeah, and we had to make it up as we went along. There wasn't any sort of thing that said, 13 people every year will be given this golden opportunity and win the golden ticket. So work your ass off, and someday you might get this golden ticket. It was more like, be original, be talented, be good, create cool stuff, and if people like it, you'll be able to build something.
So it almost sounds to me like there's now almost a commodification of what some younger people looking to explore drag might sort of look for in terms of how they engage with it, because they have such a strong emblem like RuPaul's Drag Race to sort of be their guidepost. Whereas it sounds like you, without sort of a rubric with how to do drag, had to discover for yourself really what it meant. And it was therefore a little bit more personal and a little bit more unique and a little bit more inspirational to others.
I mean, maybe I think unique for sure, because even if you look at our styles, you look at my makeup style versus Coco, or Heclina and Varla and Jackie and Lady Bunny and whoever, Vaginal Cream Davis, like all those queens from back when we started. We didn't have YouTube videos, we didn't have a TV show, so our makeup, Dina Martina, my God, it runs the gamut, and drag really could have been anything. And so, but now you really see where it's like everyone kind of has the same contoured nose. And, when something original does come along, like, Trixie Mattel or something, then of course it's then imitated or, recreated over and over again. So it's really just the fact that it's just so popular. It's bound to be less unique, I guess. Yeah. I don't know.
What are the current and upcoming projects that you have in store? I know COVID has, of course, affected a lot of these things, but...
Yeah, that's a very hurtful question. No, I'm just kidding.
It's a hurtful and horrible question.
How dare you? No. Luckily, I've been able to, what's the word? Survive. I wouldn't say that I'm thriving. We recently, actually yesterday, just got rid of one of my storage units because it seemed silly to continue paying to store a bunch of stuff that we're not using and don't see ourselves using anytime soon. So that's kind of a surreal thing, to realize that your business has no real income for the foreseeable future. That being said, it's not totally dire because I've been able to segue into doing some of these online shows, and that's fine. And I think that's going to really help. And so I've been taking old stage shows of ours, and we started with our Witches of East Bay show with Chad Michaels and Coco Peru last month, and this month we're doing my Hocus Pocus show with Jinx and Ben. and putting those online with a live experience.
Yeah.
So it feels like you're attending a show because the three of us will be there introducing the stage show and then kind of sharing behind the scenes stories. And actually with Hocus Pocus or Hokum Pokum, we're going to include some never before seen, rehearsal footage and things like that make it more of an event. So that's been working nicely. And then I've also done online what we call our idol worship shows, where I interview people I idolize. So I did one with for Rocky Horror with Nell Campbell and Patricia Quinn, who played Magenta and Columbia in the movie. And I did one with Mink Stoll. And so I've just kind of what I haven't done is done a ton of stuff. I've been kind of spacing it out because behind the scenes, my production company, Into the Dark, was able to get a PPP loan from the government, which is what is it called? Payroll Protection Program. And what that has meant is that I've been actually at the San Francisco Mint with a crew of people building a whole new show that will open next year.
Ooh, that's
so
amazing.
Even though we're not opening this year, we actually built a whole new Terror Vault show.
I love that.
Yeah. So my hope is, and what I'm working on now that I have all these incredible haunt sets, is I'm writing a script that's about three people building a haunted attraction, one of whom happens to be a drag performer. So we're hoping to shoot the movie. So yeah, I think things are fine. I mean, it just means switching gears and being creative. Like I might not, I don't know. There's definitely a lot of negative right now, but I'm kind of focusing on the positive stuff.
Well, that's great to hear, because I will not rest until I have seen a Peaches Scribes performance live. I can promise you that.
Oh, good, because that's my big reluctance to doing these events online is like, and I changed my feeling after watching Witches of East Bay with Coco and Chad, because I realized as I was watching it, in 25 years of creating these stage shows, I had never, ever, not once, sat and watched on video one of my shows in its entirety. And I really enjoyed it.
Aw, I love that.
I really got to appreciate the performances. And Thomas Dekker, who played the Jack Nicholson character, was so brilliant on stage. But like, even though I'm the director, but when you're in a show and you're producing it and you're on stage, it's like I've never gotten to sit back and just watch a show, and I really enjoyed it. And I feel like I could kind of watch it, through the audience's eyes for the first time. Yeah. It was really nice.
Yeah, I think as a piece of your legacy, it will be fun to have this in store to watch in the future as well.
Well, that's why we've always archived these shows. Thank God we have. But it wasn't so that we could do this. It was actually because over the years, people have said they would pitch a documentary to me and about me. And I would say, no, I'm not old. What do you mean? You should do a documentary about me when I'm like retired or dead or something,
Yeah.
But, here, I will make sure you have beautiful footage to use because, I don't want people's crappy. So selfishly, this is so obnoxious. I've been archiving these shows with good cameras and everything because I'm like, well, someday, we'll do it. Someone will do a documentary and I'll be able to hand them, good footage.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy that you're doing that. It's something that needs to be experienced. But before we wrap up, we're gonna expose you to our lightning round of fun questions. Are you ready?
Okay, so now these are just like single word answers, or do I elaborate?
Yeah, you can elaborate a little bit, but yeah. Okay. So we're gonna start off with the first question, and that is, what is your favorite horror movie?
A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Ooh.
So, I mean, it's not necessarily the most original answer, but it's just, I saw it when I was a kid, and it was just very formative because it was that mixture of fantasy with horror, and Freddy Krueger was just so wicked and awful and monstrous, especially in that first film, while also being sassy and, it was just very, very inspiring. in a
Yeah.
specific way.
Next question: Lady Gaga or Madonna 3 phases ago?
So it's got to be Madonna, and it's
Yeah.
you know, of course, you know, I'm 46. I'll tell you my age. And so, you know, the formation of my queer identity and being, you know, young when Like a Prayer came out while I was in Catholic high school, or not even high school, you know, junior high or whatever. And that album coming out and her being banned from Pepsi Cola and her commercial being pulled, you know, with a woman dancing in front of burning crosses and kissing a black saint unapologetically. You know, it completely blew my mind. And then she continued to blow my mind for years. Now, I would say that, you know, in the last, you know, decade or so, I've been maybe less inspired by her. But, you know, I feel like this, like she can get as weird and as goofy as she wants. She is Madonna, you know, and what she did for queer people and the way that she, at a time when nobody was doing this, in the height of AIDS, was putting queer, flamboyant men of color on stage when she was at the height of her popularity. I mean, Madonna was second to Michael Jackson, you know, around the world. You know, people don't realize like what that meant to, you know, queer people. It was, you know, it was so ahead of its time and so fearless and unapologetic. So, you know, Lady Gaga is amazing. I'm definitely a Lady Gaga fan, but I also feel like, you know, she, I mean, she's obviously a fan of Madonna's, you know.
Well, she's certainly shaped a lot of queer people with the history. So absolutely.
Yeah.
Next question: current favorite TV show?
I have to say, just because I'm still blown away by its audacity and then also its, you know, quality, is the show Pose. I feel like Pose, yeah, I feel like,
Yeah.
you know, Ryan Murphy, it's really easy to criticize Ryan Murphy, especially when you're a queer man who's made movies and done film, you know, especially when you love horror. It'd be very easy for me to be the bitter queen who, you know, is nowhere near as successful as this man. And I will say that I don't necessarily enjoy all of the American Horror Stories. In fact, most of them I don't care for. But when he does it right and he does it well, his stuff is so brilliant. So like, you know, Feud I thought was just incredible. And then Pose, for, you know, a very, very successful white gay man to use his leverage and his power to create a show like Pose, where he's basically handed over the reins to people like Our Lady J and other trans folks and people of color, both behind the camera and in front of the camera, is extraordinary. And then the fact that the show is so good speaks for itself, because, you know, let trans people play trans people. Oh, look at this. It's good. We like it. It makes sense, you know. So I'm really proud of him for being able to be successful enough to be in a position to tell effects, this is what I'm doing, whether you like it or not. And then, you know, they're currently shooting a third season. So, you know, it's just so great when something like that works.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah, it is really and truly great TV.
It is.
So next question then in our list. Here's a little more offbeat one. If there's a spider in your house, do you kill it or do you set it free?
I set it free, but part of that is that my partner is the kind of person who wouldn't kill anything.
Aww.
And, you know, literally is the kind of person who will stop and smell the roses. Or like, I remember when we first got together, he would look at pigeons and be like, "Aw," you know, like, and I'm going, that is a fucking pigeon. Like, are you crazy? But, you know, he's really helped me see the beauty in everything. And, you know, it rubs off on you. You know, now I back then I would have just killed the spider, you know? But now I would probably, you know, I would try to safely get it outside.
I love that. All right. Well, since we had a little touch of your childhood, did your parents have a nickname they used to call you that, you know, kind of, maybe it doesn't apply to you today, but like it just, you remember it because they just always called you that when you're growing up?
Yes, they called me the agitator.
Ooh, why?
Because, and they still call me that because I love to like get my brother and sister and parents all riled up and create drama, and usually over really silly stuff like pranking people, and just, I mean, I don't want to actually not serious drama, but certainly I was constantly kind of pranking them and teasing them.
Interesting. Okay. The agitator. I love that. I love that. So then,
Hmm.
what? One last question. Name the one vice that you have that you think not many people know about.
Well, I was going to say food, but everyone knows about that these days. Just take one look at her. Oh my God. So it's really not a secret, especially now. I mean, I have gained the COVID-19, so it's no secret. But I let's see, a vice that people may not know about besides food. Oh, I have. What really grosses people out is I really like watching those pimple popping videos.
Oh, yeah. What's that woman's name? Where is she?
Dr.
Dr. Pimple
Pimple
Popper. Yes,
Popper.
yes, yes. She has like her own show
Yeah.
on television. She started out on YouTube,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah. And I follow her on Instagram. And I have to say her TV show is like really hardcore. I mean, you kind of have to work your way up to it. Like, and because I think there's a difference between, watching someone pop, a zit, which is how I got into it. Cause it's like, oh, I find that kind of fun, nice to watch. But now I'm like literally watching her like excise like giant overgrown cysts the size of watermelons and stuff, and it definitely is like people are either get it or they don't.
I can see a little bit of that inspiration from Dr. Pimple Popper and some of the wonderful for like into the vault, the terror vault, with some of these like more
Yeah,
gruesome clown like creatures you've created. I can absolutely see the inspiration in those.
yeah, for sure.
All right. It was truly, truly an honor to have you on, Peaches Christ. It's been a lovely, lovely time. I'm laughing so hard, I'm going to be constipated for weeks.
Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Could you please tell our audience where they can find you or find more information about you?
Well, I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and on all three of those, I'm verified. So it's pretty easy. But I just joined
Ooh.
TikTok, and I'm at Peaches Christ 666 there because of course, people have to steal your name before you can get it.
Of course.
And that's why you have to get verified because I one time emailed this woman. And I said, "Oh my God, you have the name Peaches Christ, on Twitter. That's my drag. You might not know this because I could see that she was in Ireland, but I'm this drag performer who goes by that name." And she said, "Oh, I know. I'm a huge fan." And I wrote back like, "Well, then can I have my name?" And then she just stopped She just stopped communicating with me.
Oh my God!
Like, isn't that weird? I mean, what is that?
Yeah.
It's like weird
that is
leverage
horrible.
or power or something.
She's like, "I'll sell it to you," and you're like, "Oh gosh."
Well, no, she didn't even say anything. So I emailed Twitter, and they said there was nothing they could do about it. And I sent them all the correspondence, and they said there's just nothing we can do. If she has it, she has it. And then a month later, I got this anonymous message from someone at Twitter that said, "Go and claim your name at Peaches Christ." And I went, and it was available, and I claimed it.
Oh.
And I wonder if some Peaches fan that works at Twitter, because they're in San Francisco, didn't just steal it from that bitch and give it to me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I have no idea what happened. All I know is that I got it.
Yeah.
Oh
No, don't ask any questions. Just be like, yes, and yes.
Yeah. I mean, the email was cryptic. No one signed it. Yeah, it was kind of crazy.
That's amazing. All right. Thank you so much, Peaches, for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
welcome back, guys. It's time for us to answer our listeners' questions. What do we got, Scott?
All right. Well, our first question for today is from Perry. And the question is, when did you last give a gift and what was it?
Last time I gave someone a gift was, this is going to sound really cheesy. It was actually flowers and chocolate.
Aw, that's so adorable.
Can you imagine me doing something like that?
I
don't
mean,
think so.
I think that people who have that gruff exterior where they try to paint themselves as too cool, like, are exactly the people who do these very sweet things discreetly. So it makes me happy to still hear that you did it, though.
What about you?
So somewhat similar, but so my mom was having a lousy day last week, and so I actually sent her some flowers just to let her know I was thinking about her.
Oh, that's so cute. Look at you.
I know. I try.
We're so adorable. Aww.
I mean, we're putting on a good act, right? If nothing else.
Absolutely. All right. The next question is, what superpower would you choose for yourself? And this one is from Laura.
So, Laura, I would probably have to say the superpower I would choose, maybe it's a little basic, but I've always been obsessed with telekinesis. Jean Grey was my jam growing up. She was the ultimate when it came to what I thought a superhero would be. And so having telekinetic powers would be just my dream come true.
Just to move around things without having to...
I mean, it does.
Yeah,
it does lend to my lazy tendencies. So, I mean, there is that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me it would probably be teleportation.
Ooh,
because just imagine the potential of just moving around whenever you wanted, wherever you wanted. If you're a creep, that's also a pretty huge benefit. But I promise I would keep my morals if I had the power of teleportation.
Sure. We could go with that. I mean, I wasn't going to bring up that you were going to maybe do something scandalous with those teleportation powers. You brought that one up yourself. So I just think that that's a little suspicious now, if you hear what I'm saying.
Absolutely not. I would be a gentle soul.
I'm sure you would. I'm absolutely. But our last question for the day is coming from Novo, and they ask, if you could compare yourself with any animal, which would it be and why?
I think there would probably be a cat, because I love cats, and I have a tendency to liking doing things on my own terms. Might be a bit selfish in that regard. So yeah, I think I have the personality of a cat in general.
Nice. I think I would probably choose a wolf.
Ooh.
Yeah, just because they can exist very well in social structures, but they can also adapt to operate pretty effectively on their own as well. And they're intelligent, they're complex, I think that they are fascinating creatures that, again, I can find a lot of parallels with in how I like to operate myself.
Yeah, I can see a wolf would be fitting for you, actually.
I'd like to think so.
All right, now, once again, it's my favorite segment. It's time for the Swedish word of the day. Are you ready, Scott?
Okay. Let me just try and limber up my chops here just to see if I can get the word right. Okay, I'm ready.
I'm going to try to pronounce it as good as possible so that you will be able to do it yourself. The word for horror in Swedish is skräck.
Skräck.
Perfect. Look at you. You're getting,
oh my gosh.
You're getting better every week.
until next week, and then I absolutely butcher the word. But I'll take it. I'll take a win when I get one.
You should. I'm completely hopeful that you will learn Swedish before the end of the year. I promise you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to hold you to that. I'm holding you to it because, I've said when I get off that plane and I want to be able to converse fluently with anyone that walks by.
Absolutely. I'll make sure of that. I promise you. All right, guys. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And as usual, if you want to find more about our upcoming episodes on Twitter, you can find us at QueerAsPop. You can find me under Novakaze on Twitter and Scott under the name TheKillCannon. He's also a partner streamer on Twitch if you want to join his lovely community as KillCannon. See you next week, guys. Bye bye.
Bye bye.